Opening hook. Why does one ball have the power to stop the world? Why can 90 minutes on a grass field make millions of people scream, cry, celebrate, argue, and remember one moment for the rest of their lives? Why do children in small villages kick a plastic ball between stones, while billion-dollar stadiums on the other side of the world shake with the same dream? Why does football exist? Who created it? Who decided the rules? Who imagined a tournament where nations would face each other, not with armies, but with 11 players, one ball, and one goal? The story of football is not just the story of a sport. It is the story of ancient games, schoolyards, street chaos, empire, rules, rivalry, national pride, television, legends, heartbreak, and hope. Tonight, we are going back before the stadium lights, before Messi, before Ronaldo, before Pelé, before Maradona, before the World Cup, before FIFA, before the whistle.
Before the first official rulebook, we are going to ask one simple question. Why football? And the answer is much bigger than the game itself. This is 10,000 Why Questions, Episode 3. Why was football invented? And how did the World Cup become the greatest tournament on earth? Question mode. Why do humans love kicking a ball? Before football became a sport, it was a human instinct. Give people an object that rolls, and sooner or later, someone will kick it. A child sees a stone in the road. He kicks it. Another child runs after it. A third child tries to stop it. Suddenly, there is a game. No stadium, no referee, no sponsor, no uniform. Just movement, competition, laughter, and the strange joy of controlling something with the feet. But why the feet? Because the feet are powerful, natural, and free. Hands are used for tools, food, fighting, carrying, building. Feet are used for balance, running, chasing, escaping. To control a ball with the feet is difficult, and that difficulty creates beauty. Anyone can pick up a ball, but guiding it with the foot, stopping it, turning it, passing it, shooting it, that requires skill. Football became powerful because it is simple to begin, but almost impossible to master. You do not need expensive equipment. You do not need a perfect field. You do not need to be tall. You do not need to be rich. You need space, a ball, and people willing to play. That is why football spread everywhere. It belongs to the street. It belongs to the village. It belongs to the beach. It belongs to the schoolyard. It belongs to the world. In many sports, the body is trained to use its most natural tools. In football, the body is trained to do something unnatural, to make the feet think. And when the feet begin to think, the game begins to feel like magic. Question Hi. WHO invented football. This is the question everyone asks. Who invented football? Was it one man, one country, one school, one king? The answer is surprising. No single person invented football. Football was not born in one moment. It grew slowly, from many ancient games played across many cultures. People have kicked balls, leather objects, stuffed materials, and inflated bladders for thousands of years. In ancient China, there was a game called Kuchu. The word roughly means kickball. Players used their feet to control and kick the ball, and the game had different forms across different periods. Some versions were competitive, some were artistic, some were connected to military training, ceremony, and entertainment. In other places, people played their own ball games too.
Ancient Greece had ball games. Ancient Rome had rough physical games. Medieval towns in Europe played wild versions of football where entire villages could chase a ball through streets and fields. These games were often chaotic, sometimes violent, sometimes dangerous. There might be few rules. There might be hundreds of people. The goal might be a gate, a tree, a wall, or the entrance to another village. So when we ask, who invented football? The honest answer is, humanity invented football. But modern football? The version with organized rules, teams, referees, clubs, leagues, and international tournaments. That story begins much later. And it begins in England. Question bar. Why did modern football begin in England? By the 1800 set, many schools and clubs in Britain were playing different forms of football. But there was one big problem. Nobody agreed on the rules. At one school, players could carry the ball. At another, they could not. In one place, pushing and kicking opponents was accepted. In another, it was banned. Some games look closer to rugby. Some look closer to modern football. Some allowed catching the ball. Some allowed hacking, which meant kicking another player's shins. Imagine trying to arrange a match between two schools. One team arrives expecting to dribble and pass. The other team arrives expecting to grab the ball and run. One group thinks physical tackles are normal. The other thinks they are illegal. Before the match even begins, there is confusion. This is why modern football needed rules. Rules do not destroy a game. Rules allow a game to travel. When everyone agrees on the same rules, strangers can play together. Schools can compete. Clubs can organize. Crowds can understand. Records can be kept. Competitions can be created. In England, industrial cities were growing. Railways connected towns. Newspapers spread information. Workers had more organized leisure time. Schools and clubs wanted sport to be structured. The game needed order. And from that need, association football was born. The word association is important. It separated this version of football from rugby football. Over time, association football was shortened in slang to soccer in some places. But around most of the world, it became known simply as football. Because for millions of people, it was the football. 9 giờ đến 11 giờ 40 phút. Question 4. Who was Ebenezer Cobb Morley? If modern football had a founding architect, one of the most important names is Ebenezer Cobb Morley. He was not a superstar player. He was not a king. He was not a billionaire owner. He was a sportsman, a lawyer, and an organizer. And in the history of football, organization changed everything. Morley believed the game needed one clear set of rules. In 1863, the Football Association was formed in England. That moment was crucial because instead of every school, club, or town playing its own version, there would now be a central body trying to define the game. Morley became the first secretary of the Football Association. At a meeting in December 1863, 13 laws were drafted. These laws helped create one single code. They banned some of the roughest parts of earlier football. Players could not carry the ball. Tripping and hacking were not allowed. The game began moving away from the world of rugby and toward the sport we recognize today. This is why Morley is often called one of the fathers of modern football. But even here, we must be careful. He did not invent every part of the game from nothing. He helped organize, write, and standardize what already existed in many forms. That is often how history works. One person does not always create the fire. Sometimes, one person builds the lantern so the fire can travel farther.
Molly gave football something it desperately needed: a shape, a language, a rule book. And once football had rules, it could become bigger than anyone imagined. Question 5. Why did football split from rugby? Long ago, football and rugby were not completely separate in the way they are today. They were part of a family of games. Different schools had different traditions. Some players wanted a game where carrying the ball and physical collision was central. Others wanted a game based more on kicking, passing, movement, and control with the feet. The big disagreement was simple. Can you use your hands? Can you carry the ball? Can you violently stop an opponent? These questions shaped the future of sport. When the Football Association's rules moved away from carrying the ball and banned hacking, some clubs did not accept that direction. They preferred the rougher handling game. Eventually, the two paths separated. One path became association football. The other path became rugby football. This split is one of the most important moments in sporting history because it created two different philosophies. Rugby became a game of carrying, collision, territory, and physical force. Football became a game of feet, space, passing, angles, timing, and goals. Of course, football is still physical. Players battle for position. They run, jump, tackle, and collide. But the heart of the game is different. In football, the hands are mostly forbidden. That single restriction changes everything. It creates mistakes. It creates beauty. It creates tension. Because the easiest tools of the human body are removed. The game asks players to solve problems with their feet, under pressure, at speed, with the whole world watching. That is why football looks simple from far away, but becomes incredibly complex when you understand it. Question 6. Why are there 11 players? Today, football feels natural with 11 players on each team. 11 against 11. One goalkeeper, 10 outfield players. But why 11? Why not 10? Why not 12? The answer is not as magical as people might imagine. Football structure developed gradually. In the early years, different games used different numbers. Some matches had more players, some had fewer. But as organized school and club football grew, 11 players became a practical and accepted number. It gave enough players to cover a large field. It allowed attacking and defending shapes. It gave room for specialists, a goalkeeper, defenders, midfielders, forwards. It created balance. Too few players and the field feels empty. Too many and the game becomes crowded and chaotic. 11 became the number that gave football its rhythm. But positions were not always like today. Early football often had many forwards and very few defenders. Teams attacked in waves. Passing was not always the central idea. In some early styles, dribbling and individual forward movement were dominant. Over time, tactics changed. Teams discovered passing, then formations, then defensive lines, then pressing, then counterattacks, then possession systems. Football evolved like a living language. The number 11 stayed, but the way those 11 moved changed again and again. That is one reason football never becomes old. The field is the same. The ball is the same. The goal is the same. But the ideas inside the game keep evolving. Question 7. Why was the first international match important? Imagine the year is 1872. There is no television, no global broadcast, no online highlights, no World Cup, no Champions League, no social media. But something historic is about to happen. Scotland and England meet in what is now recognized as the first official international football match. It ends 0-0. No dramatic winning goal, no trophy lift, no fireworks. And yet, it changes everything. Why? Because football crosses a border. It is no longer only a club activity, it becomes a contest between nations. That idea is powerful. A club can represent a town, but a national team represents identity, language, flag, history, pride. People who disagree about everything else can suddenly stand behind the same shirt. International football created a new emotional layer. It was not only about who played better, it was about who we are. That is why national matches feel different. A club can buy players. A national team cannot buy a new nation. It must work with what it has. Its players carry a symbol larger than themselves. The first international match showed that football could become more than recreation.
It could become representation. And once countries began playing each other, the next question was inevitable. What if the whole world played? Question 8. Why was FIFA created? As football spread across Europe and beyond, another problem appeared. If countries wanted to play each other, who would organize the international game? Who would recognize associations? Who would arrange competitions? Who would protect the rules? Who would decide what counted as official? In 1904, FIFA was founded in Paris. Its full name in French means the International Federation of Association Football. At the beginning, FIFA was small, nothing like the global organization people know today. But the idea was enormous. Football needed an international body because the game was no longer only British. It was moving across borders through students, sailors, workers, soldiers, merchants, migrants, and clubs. Ports carried football.
Railways carry football. Factories carry football. Schools carry football. Empire carry football. Newspapers carry football. And soon, the game began to look like a universal language. A person could travel to another country, not speak the local language, but still understand a pass, a tackle, a goal, a celebration. FIFA was created because football had outgrown its birthplace. It needed a structure big enough for the world. And once FIFA existed, the dream of a world championship became possible. But possible does not mean easy. Someone still had to imagine it clearly enough and fight for it long enough to make it real. Question 9. Who thought of the World Cup? The World Cup did not appear by accident. It needed a vision. And the name most closely connected to that vision is Jules Rimet. Rimet was a French football administrator and FIFA president. He believed football could connect nations. He believed the game could become a global competition, not only an Olympic event. Before the World Cup, international football and the Olympics was extremely important. But Olympic football had limits. Questions about amateurism, eligibility, organization, and control made things complicated. FIFA wanted its own World Championship, a tournament dedicated entirely to football. A tournament where national teams could compete for the title of best in the world. This was a bold idea. Remember, travel was difficult, money was limited, communication was slow. Many countries were far apart. A global tournament was not simple. Today, flying across the world feels normal. In the 1920s and 1930s, it was a huge challenge. Teams had to cross oceans by ship. Players could be away from home for weeks. clubs did not always want to release them. Some countries were unsure whether the tournament would succeed. But Rimé's vision pushed forward.
He did not invent football, but he helped give football its greatest stage. The World Cup became the answer to one enormous question. What if the entire planet played the same game for one trophy? Question 10. Why was the first World Cup held in Uruguay? The first FIFA World Cup was held in 1930. The host was Uruguay. But why Uruguay? For modern viewers, that might feel surprising. Why not England? Why not France? Why not a larger European country? The answer is history. Uruguay was a football powerhouse at the time. Its national team had won Olympic football gold in 1924 and 1928. The country was also preparing to celebrate the centenary of its first constitution. Hosting the World Cup became a statement, a celebration, a symbol of national pride. The tournament took place in Montevideo. Only 13 teams participated. Travel was difficult, especially for European teams. Some did not come.
But the tournament happened, and that was the miracle. The first World Cup final was Uruguay against Argentina, a South American rivalry, a packed stadium, a nation holding its breath. Uruguay won 4-2. The host country became the first World Cup champion. It was more than a football victory. It proved the tournament could exist. It proved that FIFA's idea could become reality. It proved that football could create a stage where nations gathered to compete, watch, and remember. The first World Cup was not perfect. It was smaller than today. It had fewer teams, less money, less media, less technology. But it had something more important. It had the spark. And from that spark, a global fire began. Question Remote. Why did the World Cup become so powerful? The World Cup became powerful because it combines things humans deeply care about: sport, identity, drama, uncertainty, history, heroes, and the feeling that anything can happen. In a league, a team can recover from a bad week. In the World Cup, one mistake can end a dream. One red card, one missed penalty, one goalkeeper's hand, one shot off the post, one moment. That is why the World Cup creates legends. A player may train for 20 years and be remembered for 1 second. A country may wait for generations and explode with joy after one goal. The World Cup also has rarity. It does not happen every month. It comes every 4 years. That makes it feel like a global festival. Children grow up between tournaments. Players age between tournaments. A young star in one World Cup may be a veteran in the next. A champion may become a memory. A small nation may become a miracle. Television made the tournament even bigger. Then color broadcasts. Then satellites. Then the internet. Then social media. Each generation watched the World Cup in a different way. But the emotions stay the same. A bone rolls, a whistle blows, and for 90 minutes, the world pay attention. That is the power of the World Cup. It turns football into shared memory. Question 12. Why is football called the beautiful game? Football is not always beautiful. Sometimes it is slow. Sometimes it is defensive. Sometimes it is unfair. Sometimes the best team loses. Sometimes a referee decision changes everything. Sometimes a player misses from 1 meter away. Sometimes a dream dies in silence. So why call it beautiful? Because football reflects life. You can prepare perfectly and still lose. You can be smaller
and still win. You can have less money and still fight. You can fail for 89 minutes and become a hero in the 90th. Football is beautiful because it is simple enough for anyone to understand, but deep enough for people to study forever. It is geometry, emotion, timing, courage, mistake, memory. It is a child in the street pretending to score the winning goal. It is a goalkeeper alone before a penalty. It is a defender throwing his body in front of the ball. It is a stadium becoming one voice. It is silence after defeat. It is tears after victory. Football is beautiful because it gives ordinary people extraordinary feelings. And perhaps that is why it survived. Not because it was invented perfectly, but because it became something humans needed. A place to dream. A place to belong. A place to ask, what if this time we win? Ending. So, why does football exist? Because humans love to play. Because feet can turn difficulty into art. Because ancient cultures discovered the joy of kicking a ball. Because England gave the modern game rules. Because Ebenezer Cobb Morley and the Football Association helped create a common code. Because rugby and association football separated into different paths. Because nations wanted to face each other. Because FIFA gave the international game a structure. Because Jules Rimet believed the world needed a football championship. Because Uruguay proved the World Cup could become real. And because, deep down, football is more than a sport. It is a question, who are we when the whole world is watching? This has been 10,000 Why Questions. Stay curious, because sometimes the biggest stories on earth begin with one ball.